Hello and welcome back to Lost in the World. We're going to be discussing Ayaka today because for a lot of players right now, there are some key decisions that need to be made. Who to summon for, what to save, etc. So for the first time in a while, Genshin now is going to have back-to-back new characters coming out with strong rumours of even more to follow very, very closely. So let's discuss Ayaka's role, kit, theoretical teams, artifact sets, and whether or not you should save for her. This video is for people who summon based off stats, kit and damage potential. If you summon for aesthetics or for any other reasons such as lore or whatever, you do you enjoy yourself. As I always say on stream, this is your game world and you enjoy it as you see fit. FYI, during the Kazuha banner, we will be giving away 50,000 Primogems for players looking to save for future new characters coming to Genshin Impact. This will be done via a mixture of Welkins and Primogem packs, so subscribe here, follow on Twitch and get involved. Okay, without further ado, let's get lost in the world of Kamisato Ayaka. Okay, so let's take a look at her kit and role. Ayaka is a main DPS cryo character. She imbues her attacks with cryo damage bonus after she comes out of her sprint, which by the way has been reworked so it does not have the issues like Mona's sprint does. On top of that, her skill and burst both deal cryo damage, so right now if you're playing to maximize the potential of Ayaka, disperse of any ideas that she's a physical DPS. A key first point I want to make about Ayaka is she is one of the first DPS options that has a significant amount of crowd control built into her kit by default. This is without even taking into consideration freeze. That's because her E launches enemies into the air and her Q traps them in a slashing blade whirlwind. Now larger enemies do not get trapped however in that whirlwind. And that's where the freeze comp comes in, as all hits of the burst will hit enemies that are frozen, meaning a whopping 4,300% damage on her burst at level 10 on frozen enemies. This is huge because that's a lot of damage and that's a lot of enemies that are not moving. This nicely brings us to her first caveat, which is her energy cost. Now, there are varying bits of information as to how much energy recharge or energy regen she gets from her E. But I think it's fair to assume at an 80 energy cost, she will need some energy recharge help. Diona is the obvious option here, though Bennett might be hard to pass up as her skill and burst can be easily launched from inside Bennett's burst, allowing for even more damage. But you need to be careful with the pyro application there. But we'll get into theoretical team comps later. So let's break down her kit. Keynote, on exiting Ayaka's dash, she gets an 18% cryo damage bonus for 5 seconds. On her ascension, she gets a further 10-second cryo bonus damage if she damages an enemy with the cryo damage infusion in those first 5 seconds. Now the numbers on the bonus have been tweaked multiple times between 10% and an 18% bonus. We don't know quite where it will land, it looks like it's at 18% right now, but a cryo damage bonus coming out of sprint is really nice. Her E launches enemies in the air with cryo damage, not too dissimilar to Venti's E. This has a 10-second cooldown and generates a solid amount of energy. Now this is why and where her Constellation 1 comes in, and why a lot of people are saying it's really strong. Due to her high burst cost, reducing the cooldown of her E is important as it can allow for nice energy regen and may actually negate the use of a battery, allowing for more flexibility on team compositions. Her Constellation 1 allows for a 50% chance of a 0.3 second cooldown of her E every time Ayaka applies cryo via her auto attacks. Now I don't know the exact frame count on her attack strings, but with a possible 15 seconds of cryo application to her auto attacks when Ayaka comes out of her dash and a 50% chance of reducing cooldown by 0.3 seconds every time she applies cryo, I think we are looking at a significant reduction in cooldown of her E, a large DPS spike and very importantly a large amount of energy regen. Now for most players her C4 and C6 are not viable, but for that amount of money you can assume C6 is very good. As for C2, general consensus it might not quite be worth the investment, though I personally quite like the idea of having 3 blades hitting frozen enemies even though the extra 2 are at a reduced damage. But we'll see, I think that'll need some testing. Ayaka's Q summons a whirlwind of ice that moves slowly forward. It pushes smaller enemies away from Ayaka while moving through and past larger enemies. Now in freeze teams, the enemies are frozen in place, and as I said earlier, the whirlwind would land every slash on the enemy, dealing huge damage. This makes a freeze comp really important for Ayaka and very potent. Let's quickly touch on theoretical teams and then artifact sets. Looking at how important freeze is, Xingqiu seems to be A very good pick here, maybe even a C4 child. It might be very handy having a child who has very distant hunt, allowing you to group up enemies and freeze them all, dealing maximum damage on Ayaka's burst to all enemies that have been grouped together. I know that's a very niche build, but still Xiao and maybe other characters such as, I don't know, Kazuha, could actually group enemies together and give her even more cryo damage bonus. A simpler team would focus solely on freezing enemies and landing Ayaka's burst on as many enemies as possible. Group enemies could push Ayaka's damage near that of Hu Tao and Ganyu. Now I know that is the burning question for a lot of people, because a lot of people are saving for Ganyu. Where does Ayaka sit compared to those two? And the overriding thought here is that she sits just below in terms of raw damage, but with the bonus of having crowd control built into her kit as well as having access to freeze, which I know Ganyu has. However, Ayaka doesn't have the interruption issues Ganyu does, which gives you a bit more flexibility on team selection. I like the trade-off myself. I love crowd control, and Ayaka seems to be a real blend of all the things I want in a character. A quick one on artifacts. I think it's hard to look past the Blizzard Strayer set, especially when running freeze comps, as freeze comps seem to be a key focus on Ayaka teams. Some people seem to be thinking about the new artifact set from Inazuma, but with freeze being a big part of her setups, Blizzard Strayer seems to be the way to go for sure. It's hard to turn down that crit bonus coupled with the cryo resonance crit bonus, allowing you to build heavy crit damage for big, juicy numbers. One caveat here though, versus bosses who cannot be frozen and who are very mobile, her Q will more than likely miss a lot of the time. So you're thinking enemies like the child boss fight, for example. I hope that this was helpful on Ayaka and whether or not you should save for her. I've tried to be as honest as possible using the information available to me. Should you summon? Well, I've not played her yet, so I can't 100% tell you, but a character that does damage numbers not too far off Hu Tao and Ganyu, but also has crowd control abilities in her kit and can freeze, is probably going to be really strong. On top of that, she has AoE and single target options. Due to the way her kit works, you can group things together, things that get grouped up and frozen, so you can technically hit whether it's a single enemy or a lot of enemies. Anyway, that's that. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Are you looking forward to Ayaka? Are you saving? Or are you saving for Ganyu? Let me know in the comments. Other than that, peace. Take care.